URL, you can see there's a login parameter, right? Where I have equals username at acmecomputercompany.com. Now, this is a public URL that anyone can access. If you change the domain name on that to an email address, and it doesn't even have to be a real user at the company, it just has to have the proper domain name, you will get a screen back that looks similar to what's on the screenshot here. And what it will tell you is if that organization is leveraging Azure for a managed directory perspective, or if they're actually leveraging a federated environment, so ADFS. And it will actually point you to where that ADFS URL is as well. So this is something from a Recon perspective, right up front, we can say, all right, this organization's using ADFS, and this is where their authentication portal is. Or they're just leveraging managed Azure authentication. The second URL is a way for us to actually gather tenant IDs. Now, in most cases, the tenant ID isn't all that useful. What is useful is if we were to compromise a service principal credential. And in a lot of cases, that might be something we find in like a piece of code, right? Because service principals tend to be leveraged from an API-based authentication to carry out various purposes within Azure. And in order to authenticate as a service principal, you do have to have the tenant ID. So that second URL will help you get the tenant ID. Username enumeration is something that is another big topic for us as attackers, because we need to, if we're going to perform any sort of password attacks, we have to have a good user list. And in general, when we start attacks, one of the things we will do is we'll try to enumerate as many employee names as possible through sites like LinkedIn and various other tools that can help us gather employee names. And then we'll try to mangle that into a list of actual employee email addresses. And there have been a number of different username enumeration vulnerabilities over the years, and one of them that is still there is this Microsoft login microsoft.com/common/OAuth2 token URL. So this is actually where authentication happens for Azure in most cases. So whenever you go to log in with the browser, this is a URL that gets hit with the web request during that authentication process. And that endpoint is actually extremely verbose and will tell you a lot of information about users, especially if you have a valid credential. So this particular URL, first off, it'll tell you if a username exists or not. Secondly, it will actually describe whether or not MFA is enabled for that user or not, and if it's third-party MFA or if it's Microsoft MFA. So it's very easy for us to go and identify, hey, I have a valid credential. However, there's MFA for this user. And maybe it's Microsoft, maybe it's something else, as well as a number of different conditional access policies as well. So I have a script that I'll show